Assalamualaikum and a very good day to Prof. Hassani, Dr. Zamri and fellow students. We are Group 5. Welcome to our presentation. Our group had choose the topic of public and private sectors collaboration as well as international cooperation to combat money laundering in Malaysia. Our groups consist of me, myself, Nur Fadila Ahmad and Nur Azdiani Rolib. Money laundering is a common method used by criminals or groups of criminals to turn their illegally acquired funds into legitimate funds. Criminals use money laundering to cover up their illicit sources of income. Additionally, it involves cleaning up dirty money so that the authorities cannot determine where the money originated. For instance, converting illegally obtained funds from bribery, drug trafficking, smuggling, and the sale of human beings into money that appears to be lawful. Since law enforcement can't easily identify cash, most unlawful transactions are in cash. Three steps are used by criminals. The first stage is placement, one of the methods for separating illicit monies from their sources and putting them into the financial system. This first stage is easy for law enforcement to catch since it involves getting rid of cash. Layering transaction to mask illegal payments is money laundering second stage. The criminal conceals illegal funds through bank transactions. It hides the source. Depositing cash into multiple accounts and transferring it to one or more, generating duplicate invoices for the same transaction, selling illicitly obtained assets, and depositing unlawful funds in a bank or third-party business are all layers. The final stage of money laundering involves high-value real estate, valuables, and bank money. At this level, illegal contributions look legitimate, so authorities can't detect them. Integrating involves changing invoices to shift money overseas and finance legitimate companies. Malaysian finance can be used to fund terrorists or launder money. Malaysian banks can be abused by drug dealers, terrorists, and criminals. To combat money laundering, Malaysia passed the Anti-Money Laundering Act (AMLA) in 2001. Financial regulation must be followed to stop terrorism and money laundering. In accordance with the Act, which became effective on January 15, 2002, Bank Negara Malaysia has been assigned to combat money laundering. There was no legislation in Malaysia that expressly addressed the subject of anti-money laundering prior to the enactment of AMLA 2001. Discussing the source of unlawful funding is not a novel idea. In fact, it has been addressed in a number of laws since the 1980s. These statutes include the Dangerous Drugs Forfeiture of Property Act 1988, the Anti-Corruption Act 1997, now repealed by the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission Act 2009, the Labuan Trust Act 1996, now renamed as the Labuan Trust Act 1996 by the Labuan Offshore Trust Amendment Act 2010, the Penal Code, and the Customs Act 1967. Concerns regarding Malaysia's technical compliance with international standards and anti-money laundering and counter-financing of terrorism procedures prompted the 2001 Act's revision. The Anti-Money Laundering, Anti-Terrorism Financing and Proceeds of Unlawful Activities Act of 2001, often known as UNLAWPA 2001, was enacted after being introduced into Parliament by Dato Ahmad Maslan in December 2013. The UNLAWPA 2001, formerly known as the Anti-Money Laundering and Anti-Terrorism Financing Act 2001, or UNLAWFA in 2007, and AMLA in 2001, has been renamed. The new Act covers illegal revenue and tools. The new amendment consolidates several offences, including principal money laundering offences and inchoate offences, and creates two new offences, which are structuring transaction to evade reporting requirements and structuring to avoid declaration under Part 4A. It also creates new offences like cross-border cash transfers and tipping of money laundering disclosure. According to the second schedule of UNLAWPA 2001, there were 356 crimes listed in the Act under 42 different pieces of legislation as of December 1, 2015. Several agencies have enforcement responsibility under the Act depending on the nature of the violation that has been committed. Law enforcement agencies responsible for carrying out functions under this Act must ensure that their actions are within the scope of their jurisdiction and do not violate any other provision of the Act. Any law enforcement agency, action, or decision that goes outside the scope of the law enforcement agency's jurisdiction can be challenged and brought to court. The Financial Intelligence Unit or FIU were established to investigate money laundering and terrorism financing. Financial intelligence comes from reporting organizations, law enforcement, or global divisions. These platforms provide cash thresholds and suspicious transaction reports. The relevant local law enforcement agencies will receive the financial intelligence findings. Part 5 of the Unlocked Law 2001 empowers law enforcement authorities to respond to corruption or criminal activities in their jurisdiction. The enforcement agency may also request financial intelligence from the FIU. Malaysia has formed the National Coordination Committee or NCC to combat money laundering activities. The NCC is a government agency that was set up in 1999 to coordinate, administer and monitor the country's efforts to combat money laundering and the financing of terrorism. Bank Negara Malaysia chairs and serves as the secretariat for this interagency forum. The NCC working group aims to investigate and resolve practical concerns about carrying out and improving the impact of initiatives approved at the NCC high level. The NCC top leadership is in charge of formulating national policies and projects, offering guidance and deciding the organization's general course. The minister and their deputies from the various government departments and agencies make up this body. In addition to this, the NCC is home to many specialized committees that work on projects like the targeted financial sanctions on terrorist financing and proliferation financing. The NCC Secretariat is housed at Bank Negara Malaysia. The members of the NCC consist of, among others, Attorney General Chambers or AGC, Bank Negara Malaysia, MACC, Polis Diraja Malaysia and several government ministries as well as commissions. The goal of the NCC is to create and put into action a comprehensive national strategy, set of rules and processes for stopping the financing of terrorism and money laundering, while also making sure that this framework adheres to the international best practices. As a result, the National Risk Assessment or NRA 2020 was established. The National Risk Assessment or NRA evaluates and clarifies money laundering and terrorism financing. The NRA evaluates money laundering and terrorism funding threats in terms of method, scale and sources and financial and non-financial sector vulnerabilities. The NRA is Malaysia's annual collaborative effort under the NCC and follows Financial Action Task Force or FATF best practices and recommendations. Bank Negara Malaysia as NCC Secretariat oversaw NRA 2020 with input from MACC, Polis Raja Malaysia and the Inland Revenue Board. Fraud, including cheating, an illegal investment scheme, illicit drug trafficking, corruption and bribery, smuggling, organized crime, and terrorism are the top 6 crimes that pose a money laundering risk to the country, according to NRA 2020.
Hello, Doctor and fellow friends. I'm Nur Izdiani. I will continue our presentation with the subtopic of private sector collaboration. As all we know that the financial institutions or banks play important role in assisting government to combat money laundering, terrorism financing. I would like to give example to one case that happened to the bank. It involved fraudulent loan by Bank of Credit and Commerce International, or known as BCCI. In this case, the regulator took 12 years to reach the conclusion that the crimes had happened widespread in Britain, Luxembourg, the Cayman Islands, and elsewhere. In this case, according to the Pricewaterhouse, the auditor, is probably one of the most complex deceptions in banking history. As I mentioned before, that the financial institutions or banks play an important role in assisting government to combat money laundering. Now, we have to understand why actually the money launderers get attracted to the bank system. There are two reasons. First is the intricacy, and second is the confidentiality of the bank system itself. Financial institutions or banks have been categorized as one of the reporting institutions. It is stated under Section 3 of the UNCLOS 2001, which define reporting institution as any person, including branches and subsidiaries outside Malaysia, of that person who carries on any activity listed in the first schedule. Now, we have to refer to the first schedule of the AMLAP 4 2001, which it listed the activities carried out by a licensed bank. There are few requirements under the AMLAP 4 that need to be followed by the banks. It is actually very pertinent for the banks to follow, especially on reporting suspicious transactions. It is because reporting suspicious transactions is a crucial component of anti-money laundering measures, because it will alert the enforcement agencies on any suspicious transactions that could lead to the money laundering or terrorist financing. I will explain the requirements provided under the AMLAP 4. First requirement is customer due diligence, or known as CDD. It is provided under section 16 of the AMLAP 4, and it is in line with the recommendation 10 of FATF. I will explain about FATF later. CDD means the banks are prohibited neither from opening nor operating any fictitious, false, or incorrect name. Moreover, they are also forbidden neither from establishing nor conducting any kind of business relationship, transaction, or activity involving fictitious, false, or incorrect names. It is actually imposed a huge responsibility of the banks to maintain the accounts, records, or information of any relationship, transaction, or activity strictly under the name of account holder or customer. Now, if we see behind the uh, section 16 itself, it is actually the purpose is actually to help the banks in identifying any transactions that are questionable and could be used to commit money laundering or terrorism funding offences. It also aids banks in getting to know their clients better and assist them in deciding whether to begin, continue, or end their connection with the customers. Next is the maintenance of the records. It is provided under section 17 of the AMLAP 4 and parallel with recommendation 11 by FATF. Now, recommendation 11 by FATF requires maintenance to be maintained for not less than 5 years for either domestic or international transactions. The purpose is to enable the banks to immediately fulfill the information request by competent authority. Section 17 of the AMLAP 4 provides otherwise. For the period of maintaining the records under AMLAP 4 is at least 6 years from the date of the account is closed, of the business relationship, transaction, or activity is completed or terminated. As for the third requirement, the banks are required to perform ongoing CDD as well as updating the information in the CDD either regularly or when the banks trigger suspicious events. It is actually an ongoing due diligence and business relationship monitoring. Next, it is the next requirement is reporting on any suspicious transactions. It is provided under section 14 of the AMLAP 4, parallel with recommendation 20 FATF. Now, under section 14 of the AMLAP 4, it provides 3 circumstances in which the banks need to quickly report to the competent authority if the following situations happen. First, any transaction exceeding such amount specified by the competent authority. Second, if any officer or employee of that specific bank has suspicions about any transaction involving proceeds, illicit behavior, or other situations that have been implicated, as well as the identification of the parties involved or the transaction itself. Last but not least, if any bank officer or employee has reason to believe that a transaction or piece of property is somehow connected to, used for, or intended to be used in support of a terrorist act, a terrorist organization, a group of terrorists, or a person who finances terrorism. Section 19 of the AMLAP 4 provided for internal control, which is equivalent to recommendation 18 of FATF. Section 19.1 of the UMROT FAR provides that the banks must design, create, and put into effect internal programs, policies, procedures, and controls to safeguard against and catch any violations of the Act. The obligation is actually applicable to all its branches and subsidiaries, either locally or internationally. As I explained before, UMLOT 4 actually impose a huge obligation on banks and bank officials. Failure to comply for the bank officials can result in a fine up to 1 million ringgit, 3 years in prison, or both. It is provided under Section 22, Subsection 4 of the UMLOT 4. Whilst for the banks, Section 21, Subsection 2 provides that a bank license can be revoked or suspended if it commits an offence. Now, Section 24, Subsection 1 of the UMLOT 4 protects such person if they report in good faith from civil, criminal, or disciplinary proceedings. I would like to share one case where a bank had been penalised for non-compliance with the rules. Citibank in 2012 had been fined of 70 million USD by the United States bank regulator as it failed to address the inadequacies in its anti-money laundering policies. In 2021, Citibank agreed to pay 400 million USD to federal regulators. This is because it had been involved in unsafe and unsound banking practices, including its money laundering activities. This example actually it gives a good lesson to our banks, our local banks, on the importance of abiding money laundering laws. We have and as a conclusion, actually we can see how money laundering and the existence of UMLOT 4 give impact to the private sector. In this context, financial institutions or banks must evaluate the importance of upholding the law against the anonymity of their clients. Actually, when we see as I explained before, the compliance to the UMLOT 4 2001 prevails because the impact is much more pertinent as it affects the country as a whole. Next is the international cooperation by Malaysia. Right. Malaysia also cooperates with international organizations. It is actually pertinent for Malaysia to have international cooperation as it will strengthen its commitment in combating corruption. Malaysia has ratified United Nations Convention Against Corruption, or known as UNCAC, on September 24, 2008. UNCAC is the one and only international instrument on anti-corruption. There are five main areas of the convention. First is the preventive measures. Second is the criminalization and law enforcement, international cooperation, asset recovery and technical assistance, as well as exchange information. Next, by virtue of Section 8.1 of the UMLOT 4 2001, Bank Negara Malaysia has been appointed as the competent authority. As the competent authority, Bank Negara Malaysia has been given a power to enter into agreements or arrangements with foreign authorities on the matter of exchange information. This cooperation is meant for investigation or prosecution of money laundering, terrorist financing, and other predicated offences. Ever since the cooperation until 2020, BNM has entered into MOU with more than 40 foreign FIUs. Next is the Egmont Group. Egmont Group is actually an international organization which facilitates cooperation and intelligence sharing and exchange of information, knowledge, and cooperation between members of FIUs. So, with this platform, BNM is cooperating with 165 FIUs around the world in exchanging financial intelligence information without having to have MOU. Instead, only premise on arrangements provided under the Egmont Group of Financial Intelligence Units Charter, as well as Egmont Group of Financial Intelligence Units Principle for Information Exchange between Financial Intelligence Units. As I mentioned about before that, we have followed the FATF. FATF is actually an international organization created by G7 in 1989. The goals of FATF is actually to create a standard, support law enforcement, monitor and combat money laundering, financing of terrorism, and threats to the integrity of the global financial system. FATF plays an important role as an ombudsman to the global money laundering and terrorist financing, as well as to generate the political will of a country to have national legislative and regulatory reforms. I mentioned about the recommendation before, and actually, FATF has created an international standard known as 40 recommendation. This recommendation becomes a global policy benchmark, and it has been accepted worldwide by the UN, IMF, World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and other international organizations and bodies. As the country who is committed to combat these crimes, Malaysia has become a direct member of FATF. Next is Asia Pacific Group on Money Laundering, or known as APG. Malaysia is a member of APG since May 2000. APG was formed in 1997 in Bangkok, consisting of 41 members, and APG actually one of the largest regional FATF link organization in terms of both membership numbers and geographic scope. The primary goal of APG is to protect its members' participation in the implementation of global standards against money laundering, terrorist funding, and proliferation finance related to weapons of mass destruction. Malaysia also worked closely with the largest international police organization known as Interpol, or International Criminal Police Organization. As the largest international police organization, Interpol serves to facilitate collaboration among police around the globe. It is actually pertinent for Malaysia to have close cooperation between regional as well as international organization in combating this kind of crimes. Last but not least, Malaysia also is a member to IMF, or International Monetary Fund, besides 188 other countries in the world. IMF's functions are to foster global monetary cooperation, secure financial stability, facilitate international trade, promote high employment and sustainable economic growth, and also reduce poverty around the world. Now, for the purpose of money laundering, IMF gives assistance in formatting the policy of domestic as well as international anti-money laundering, counter-terrorist financing. To conclude, we can see that Malaysia has taken so many efforts in fighting the crimes of money laundering. As the world are facing a crime that can undermine the economy of a country, global cooperation is very much pertinent and very much needed to coordinate policies, strategies, as well as respond to money laundering activities. Moreover, by sharing knowledge and information, it will also assist us in strengthening our enforcement and prosecution, as well as confiscating the illegal proceeds from the hands of criminals. Thank you.
For findings and recommendations, first, it is crucial to ensure that the public officials chosen to act as integrity or enforcement officers are skilled professionals in the range of their duties. This is done to make sure that the officer in charge of the portfolio can effectively handle any complaints or issues that are brought out in compliance with the laws and regulations that are enforced. Furthermore, the selected officers must be honest and free from any violations of the disciplinary code of conduct, especially to avoid any issues of power abuse. In this instance, the selection of integrity or enforcement officer can be done through a thorough interview process rather than just appointing someone to fill the integrity or enforcement officer post in the relevant ministry or department. Next, sometimes the legislation itself is not the issue. Even if comprehensive legislation is created, it will be useless if it does not address the core issues. As we can see, banks have a significant impact. It is crucial that the banks carry out outreach initiatives to inform the public about money laundering. Unfortunately, the shows we constantly see advertise their loans. There is no harm if banks also inform the public about money laundering at the same time. Additionally, during customer due diligence, bank representatives should be able to educate their clients. Naturally, bank employees must explain what money laundering is to the clients in simple terms for a better comprehension. Otherwise, it would seem technical to the customer since not all of them are well educated and aware of the crime. Lastly, the media is crucial in educating the general public. As we can see from the COVID-19 pandemic, where information was effectively spread across the nation thanks to engaging advertisements that drew viewers in and the use of straightforward language, the public was successfully reached with the message. The same is true with money laundering. It functions as a silent killer that can destroy a nation's economy. Because of this, it is crucial that the general public is aware. It goes without saying that the media must collaborate with all pertinent agencies to make it a reality. Thus, it is crucial that all organizations, whether public or private, cooperate to prevent money laundering and terrorist financing. As for the conclusion, the UNLAW 2001 gives both the public and private sectors the authority to carry out their respective functions in the fight against money laundering and terrorism funding. It is wise to delegate responsibility to these two areas in order to prevent the funding of terrorism and money laundering. To control these operations, close collaboration with international organizations is crucial in addition to the interaction between these two sectors. This is because it makes it possible to take preventative steps with the help of outside parties rather than depending entirely on the local regulatory body. Likewise, it helps the nations learn more effectively through exchanging information and knowledge. Thank you.